Great, it's great to be here. Thank you. I love Colorado. I met my wife here. I got engaged here. This is my fantasy place to live. You're all really, really lucky because we don't have this in Washington, and what we have in Washington, I'm not sure it's what you want.
Well, there is some method to our madness. We want you telling everybody how great Colorado is.
I do.
Awesome, awesome. So as I mentioned before, we're going to talk about tariffs, regulation, and taxes. We're going to talk about closing the tech talent gap, and we're also going to talk about how do you thrive in this environment. My fear is that we're not going to get off the first topic, and
I'll keep it short.
Okay. Well, don't keep it too short. We got 35 minutes here, okay? All right. Let's start with China, shall we? Is anybody interested in that subject? Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna give a brief synopsis, and then you're going to tell me if I did it right, okay?
Okay.
All right. So the U.S. and China think a lot differently about intellectual property. Does everybody agree with that? Yeah. So that is a point of tension for us, right? And about 18 months ago, things really started heating up. And in July of 18, the current administration started levying some pretty heavy tariffs on goods like steel, aluminum, solar technology. And then since then, we've been seeing an escalation in what products fall under tariffs and the percentage in which there are tariffs applied. So 10%, 25%, billions and billions of dollars. And as this escalation has happened, China has responded. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
All right.
So I'm going to put this in context. I'm going to raise it up a lot higher very quickly. China has a different view of the world than we do and Europe does. China has a view of the world where today what they're doing is they're socially rating all their individuals on the basis of whether they've jaywalked, whether they pay their bills on time, what they've said publicly, who their friends are and how their friends are ranked. And because of these different rankings, using social media and other things, you could be denied going to a hotel, traveling, you'll be moved down in dating sites, all sorts of penalties, and they're going to have everyone ranked, they say, by next year. Now it's about 20 or 30 million people. China does not allow freedom of religion, freedom of choice, freedom to access the internet and get websites like Google or Facebook, or use Twitter, or just about any US news site. They don't allow religion, freedom to marriage. They don't allow a lot of the values that we have as Americans, that our freedom depends upon. And there's a battle going on in the world in the future between the Chinese system and our view of the world, along with the European and others' view of the world, about the individual and the rights that the individual has versus the collective. And that's being fought out in technology is the biggest battle right now. Technology, they took a lot of our technology to do business in China, as some of you have. You have to agree to have a partner, you have to agree to share your intellectual property, and frankly, a lot of it's just been stolen. Now they're getting a lot better, I want to be honest about that, but what they're doing is with the next battle that we all see is over artificial intelligence, which goes into self-driving cars, it goes into all sorts of robotics, all sorts of things where we'll be changing healthcare, we'll be changing transportation, communication, and they have 1 million engineers a year that they're graduating. We have a fraction. Most of our STEM graduates are not American citizen at the graduate level, and then we kick them out of the United States. But they have a strategy which is better than ours. And if you think about what artificial intelligence requires, it requires data. And data is something that there are different views in the world. China's view is, your data is my data, we share. And any data that you have, that business has, you have to be willing to give to the government. So they have as much data as they want. They have 1.3 billion people, which is double the population of the US and Europe together. And they have a legal system and a focus on artificial intelligence as a strategy in the future. So Europe has a totally different view of the world. They're so focused on privacy that you have a right to erase any facts about yourself on the internet, the right to be forgotten. And they have this thing called GDPR, which makes it very difficult to keep lists of business associates and people and send them information. Not surprisingly, Europe, plus all their regulations, they have like a handful of unicorns, which is how we measure it. China has almost as many as the United States now. Unicorns are companies with $1 billion valuation. It's one of the ways we measure innovation. So China's surging. Europe is on a very good focus on the individual. And the US, we're Goldilocks and the Three Bears. That porridge is tasting really good now. But we have to think about that as we go forward. So is China doing bad things? Absolutely. Does President Trump have the right idea in terms of finally doing something about it? Absolutely. But tariffs? That is the worst possible thing you could do. There's only one economist in the country that thinks tariffs is a good idea and that you can win a trade war. Sadly, he happens to work at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And he's quite frankly, as I said on national television last week, he's unique. He really is. He just has a different view of the world. Congress, the last time we did something this foolish was in 1930 with Smoot-Hawley. We put tariffs on a whole range of products. Thousands of economists said this is a bad idea. Congress did it anyhow. The result was 9 years of the Great Depression until basically World War II. We just did a lot of deficit spending that pumped us out of that, and we moved on. Congress gave some power to the president. Not as much power as I think President Trump is taking, but definitely has some of it, whether it's for national security or for finding unfair trade practices. But this is really bad. There is no winning a trade war, and I've spent a lot of time on this because a lot of our companies are affected by this, and obviously the stock market's been affected, the GDP is affected, everything's going up and down. And actually resolving this trade dispute is if he doesn't resolve this in the next year, he's going to face a recession, and there's not that many other tricks he has if he wants a strong economy. So, I mean, all his advisors, for the most part, don't think this is a good idea, but you give the guy credit. He listens to one or two people, and he's fighting his battle. And maybe we will get some good concessions, but that was a longer answer than you wanted.
No, that's exactly what I wanted.
But I skipped over to privacy, so you could skip that.
No, we'll get that. We'll go back. We'll go back. So we are in this trade war. If you got to make the decision, how would you get out of it, and where would you go, given the challenges that we do have with dramatically different ideologies?
Well, after Trump was elected, I wrote a series of articles saying this is what President-elect Trump should do. He should have bilateral agreements with our allies. I think you should have one now with our great friend, Great Britain, because they need a friend right now, and I believe you should stand up with your friends. And we've done a little bit of that. He renegotiated Korea. The new NAFTA, you could call it whatever you want. It's the new NAFTA. I mean, it's... we agreed to buy, the Canadians agreed to buy 4 more pounds of cheese. Let's call it a victory and move on. And the one that really gets me is the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, which is, don't worry if you don't know about it, because President Trump doesn't know about it. But it was all these countries that got together to compete with China. So they said, let's have a free trade zone among us. But President Trump clearly thinks it's a pro-China and that they're part of it and it's going to help them. So he pulled us out of it, and go figure. I didn't even know what to say about that, but we should get back in that. And ironically, because the US has pulled out, now Russia is talking about getting in there, and it's just like, this is not, we want our friends, you want your friends to be close to you, not your enemies, so.
Well, it's interesting because, as part of my responsibilities at IBM in 2016, we were talking about TPP, and it was before the election. And it was a hot potato for everybody. Nobody wanted to touch it.
It makes no sense to me. The truth is that selling trade is not an easy sell to the American people. We all love getting cheap products, but the truth is that any technology product at this point is sourced from many different countries. If you could find a product other than relatively cheap products that are just from China, take Apple, if I may. It's so great to see Apple here. When I go to China, and we have an office in China, we have an event in China, CS Asia, it's really difficult. So I'm increasingly vocal, and this is in my book. I am a little concerned about being arrested when I'm there because you're not allowed to say the things I say. But I've heard from the top Communist Party officials, Apple, they say, they only add $4 to the value of an Apple iPhone in their view, and the shareholders and the Apple employees and the public are getting all the benefits. So they have a totally different view as to who's getting a better part of the deal. To me, everyone wins. The fact that we can buy iPhones, a great product at a great price, we could do all these great things, and the rest of the world is winning. So free trade is a two-way street, and sometimes like Trump feels we're getting the worst end of the, we're not getting the worst end of the bargain. Should we have, for national security purposes, some domestic requirements? Absolutely. But the way to do it is to trade. If you're trading with a country, you are not fighting with that country. So the challenge we're facing now is, as these trade tensions are going and going around the world and speaking with leaders around the world, government leaders and business leaders, this is not just about the US and China anymore. This is about the world. Everyone is following this. Economies are starting to stink. Stock markets are jumpy because we have picked a fight with China. It's the right fight to pick, but we're using the wrong weapons.
Yeah. Well, and I would like to use the example of Huawei, and second largest cell phone manufacturer in the world, and we have a ban that has been. I want to make sure I have it right. There's been a delay, but basically. We're banning their technology because of the fear of privacy is a big part of that. What are the ramifications of that particular situation, and how do you see that one resolving?
Well, I mean, I have mixed feelings about it. The role of a government is to protect us and national security, and everyone I've talked with who has national security clearance, who's looked into this matter, they are absolutely convinced that Huawei is a threat to the US in terms of, you create a telecommunications system that they could tap into. So that's what they believe. I have to trust their view because they're my government, and they've given me no reason not to. But in terms of, is Huawei a strong competitor that could provide certain portions of the country, especially a poor population, a lower cost product? Absolutely they can. Have they done it fairly or unfairly? I don't know. But the thing about companies, whether it's Huawei or, Apple's a wonderful company, and I'll confess I'm a shareholder and a user. But if you look at the telecommunications world, it's not exactly secure places. Like there's this war on tech now, and all these big companies are considered so horrible. But think back, in our generation, how many companies were number one just in telecom? It started off with the Motorola. They were dominating cell phones. Then there was Nokia and BlackBerry and Palm, and now there's Apple. That's 5 companies all in our lifetime. So it's not a secure, or you could go to browsers and Netscape, or you could go to matching services. This is not secure positions that companies are in, and the right to be paranoid. So I'd be very careful before we just say this company is dominating or that company already has it. And in terms of Huawei, I mean, they're a tough competitor, and if they're not violating our security and they're playing by the rules of the road, I think they should be welcome.
All right, good. There was an interesting announcement in the last 24 hours out of the European Union on the European Future Fund of $100 billion. Should I skip that? Did you?
No, so yeah, I did. I actually sent some of our executives an email about it because, for you don't know, it's the Europeans, there's a paper, it might have been leaked for all I know, from the EU about how they're creating a €100 billion fund to basically try to create big companies like China and the US have. The Googles, the Apples, and otherwise, because as I said, Europe doesn't have it, and they don't have it. And I've been saying for 15 years when I go to Europe and tell them, the reason you don't have it is not because you're not smart, innovative people. The reason you're not doing well is because your tax structure, your social welfare structure, your culture. I mean, the advantage we have in this country is we are the most diverse country in the world. We have people that come from all over the world, the best and the brightest. Our relatives wanted a better life, and they're here. We have a First Amendment. We have a Constitution. We have an entrepreneurial society. We have a culture of kids and adults that ask why, and we welcome that, and we do better at that. We also basically have one language. Europe has 30 languages, and they have a culture of focusing on the individual, and not of entrepreneurship, but of protecting, and they don't have a culture of taking risks. The only country that comes close to the US in that is Israel. And what's the big deal about taking a risk in a business when everyone around you wants to kill you? So taking business risk, and also they have something we don't, which is everyone has service there. And when everyone has served their country by the age of 21 and commanded great big things with life on the line or major equipment, they produce a really mature thing, which we lack. And part of our problem in the hit on tech is we lack a little bit of maturity in some of our corporate leaders of some of the biggest companies. They just don't have the human skills they need, frankly, or the judgment skills yet. So this is concerning to me in Europe because it's first of all, it reflects a fragmented relationship with the United States, which if there was someone else in the world in the #1 spot in the White House, I don't think we'd have. If it was any Republican that ran for president or any Democrat that ran for president, we would not have that coming out of Europe the way it came out. We would not have this very almost hostile situation taking on the US this way. It would be we're allies, we're friends, we share common values in so many different ways. So what do I think about it? I think it's very dangerous because Europe has already put up Trump wants to put up a physical wall, not only for the border and immigration. He wants to put up a physical wall for trade. China's put up a wall for the internet so they're not influenced. But Europe's also put up a wall now with GDPR they want data localization. They want all their cloud there. They want everything in Europe, and now they're putting up another wall, which I think is very dangerous. And they're clearly going after some of our best and most successful companies, and I think it's very dangerous. And I just hope we become their friends again.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's complicated by Brexit because, kind of Great Britain has been, the guys that have been saying we need to do it this way. And now with Great Britain leaving, we've got another issue there. So anyway, let's go back onto the privacy a little bit. We do know that GDPR is sweeping regulation, and we have some issues with how we're handling privacy in the United States. It looks to me like we've got a patchwork of regulation at a state level. Again, I love giving him a magic wand. So if we gave you a magic wand, how would you construct and ensure the right level of privacy in the United States?
Well, first of all, you hit on one of the things already, which is that we need a national rule. I know the states want to have their own rules, but to do business and to be effective and to allow small entrants into the marketplace, to allow anyone with a great idea to create an internet site, you can't make it really difficult and put up these barriers to entry. So a national rule is very important. It's preemptive. But second of all, I think we have to recognize that we value privacy as Americans, especially on the situation we're in, but it is situational and we can't be stupid. So for example, if you're driving your car and the AAA is here, the car in front of you has their windshield wipers on, or that they're getting colder temperature. In Colorado, the temperature can go down 10 degrees in 4 miles on the way to Aspen. That's really valuable information. Is that private? Of course not. But let me go further about your healthcare information. Or the car in front of you, what if it hits the car in front of it? Don't you want to know that? Your safety will be at issue then. How about if there's a multi-car collision? Shouldn't a first responder have the ability to know what the vital signs are over everyone? If the car could transmit that information, that could save your life. We give up our privacy. We give it up when we go to airports. We give it up at our kids' schools because there's a greater reason there, and that is safety. There are other greater reasons to give up information, and actually, I'm sorry to keep using Apple as an example, but it's a good example. The smartwatches, you have an option of giving up some of your healthcare information, and people are doing it. Why? Because it's better for society and it's better for them if you could give up some of that information. And of course, it's when it's aggregated, you want to deprivatize it. But now there's this, I would call privacy hysteria that a very small, tiny segment of America is stoking, that policymakers are listening to, where we're throwing out really great information which will save lives. Look, we all know that my wife's a surgeon, and I spend a lot of time with doctors. And I know that the doctors do what they're taught. And the reality is, although Obamacare promised it with electronic medical records, it's been a total failure, even by the Obama people's estimation. And they've agreed with the Trump people that says you have to be able to now transmit and own your medical records in computer readable form. And that's a major shift from the Obama administration, but the promise was great there. It was that you would learn what works and what doesn't work. The truth is the healthcare industry does not know what works and what doesn't work. And now we have the ability to match it up with genetics, with where you live, the air you breathe, what you eat, everything about you, and actually lead healthier lifestyles, which was the promise of Obamacare to me, was that anyone who was ill shouldn't be ill because of a lack of money in our country. And we could get there a different way by, first of all, getting information and treating specifically. Second of all, and I am biased in this, is using technology also in a way to help us get there, but using, frankly, lower cost technology treatments and always reverting to drugs and surgery as we do. Because if there's one dramatic change that's occurring, it's value-based healthcare using technology, using the devices that you wear, using information you get, using focused ultrasound, which is now an alternative for 4 different types of disease, alternative to cancer, to chemotherapy and radiation therapy and surgery, where you go in on a 2-hour outpatient treatment and walk out cured of a tremor or something else. And this stuff works, but why can't we get it through the system? We're stuck in an old system that has no place for technology in terms of moving healthcare forward.
Yeah, it was pointed out by a CIO of one of our major healthcare providers here that really HIPAA is not protecting us because you've got your GPS on and they can tell if you're going to get dialysis a few times a week. So it's kind of not effective anyway.
I think HIPAA is a model that's caused a lot of problems with sharing of information by doctors. So is the electronic medical records. The truth is, the EMR doesn't talk with other doctors' systems, and doctors are not, at most they'll ever do is hit a print button and do a 100-page document. It doesn't allow doctors to skim through a document the way they used to. They have to go up, and it takes, I mean, you want to talk to something about, and the other thing about healthcare, since you've raised it, is do you realize there's a legal limit on the number of doctors in this country? It is not allowed to expand. It is in the Budget Reconciliation Act of about 12 or 15 years ago. And it says we may not train any more doctors. But think about what we're doing. We're living longer. We're getting older. The baby boomer generation is like huge. We have no one to take care of us. And we'll have a fixed number of doctors. And that's why technology is so important to provide a part of the solution, because every other aspect of the healthcare system is breaking down rapidly. And a lot of doctors are retiring early because they can't deal with EMR, frankly.
All right, so let's do a kind of tiny pivot to closing the tech gap, the tech talent gap. We know that there are more jobs that are going to be disappearing because of automation. And we know that many will change because the augmentation of automation. And we also know that there's going to be the known unknowns, that we know that we don't know what we're going to need in 5-10 years. So with that, and I know you have a foundation. Jackie's here. Hi, Jackie. Jackie Black runs the foundation for the Consumer Technology Association. What do you think we need to be doing? And this is a big sweeping question because it includes education, how we think about employment. What do you think we need to be doing to really start to tackle this faster than we're pivoting?
A lot, and thank you. I could tell you've read my book by the question. So first of all, this is where Europe is better than the US, especially Germany. In Germany, if you are technically trained, you get as much respect as someone who's academically gets the PhDs. Because fixing something and working something and making something work is considered extremely respectable. Here, we all want all our kids to go to college, which is crazy. Now, we announced with IBM, Ginny Rometty in January that we've started an apprenticeship program, which could take someone right from high school or someone who's a dropout or from the military or whatever, and put them right into a program with a company. And now Bosch just announced that they're going to do it, and other companies will announce that they're doing it. And basically, you could train someone for a year or so with a very fixed way. IBM is sharing all their knowledge on that. And I know the tech councils also have a little apprenticeship program called Apprenti. Yeah, it's very cheap. And there's never going to be enough programs to do this. But the bottom line, but you know what? The federal government, when they're giving an IT contract, they want to see degrees next to everyone's name. We've got to get over this crazy degree where we promiscuously encourage people to go to school, we throw money at them, and then they graduate with degrees in, I'll offend an art history major here, I'm sure, but something which is not going to actually get them a job. And there's a lot of value to learning a lot of different things, and I could talk about that, but the reality is we need technically trained people. And there's a rapid change now in what those are. And if you want to talk about some of the dissatisfaction in the rural portion of this country, it's that we have a lot of jobs open. We have like 9 million jobs open or so in our country, and about 3 million of them or so in the tech industry. There's a huge disconnect there. But people can't move, they don't want to move, they don't have the skills, or they're in their 40s or 50s and they're freaking out. They just don't want to do that. And what they're hearing about is self-driving cars and trucks, and the number one occupation being a driver. They're hearing about robotics and factories. And when Trump says, oh, we're going to get all these factories from China, well, yeah, they're moving out of China. They're moving to Vietnam and Thailand and the Philippines and elsewhere. And if they move here, there'll be very few people. It'll be highly automated. But what we do have to recognize is, as I said, we have a lot of older people that need help and care. We need people who could do things. We need immigration to help with that. But we also need train people. So how do we do that? Well, some people think our schools are failing. I don't think so. I think our kids are learning just what they should be learning, which is how to be creative and innovative. But what I do think is we have to start shifting what we're teaching them and how we promiscuously give kids, instead of saying, oh, well, forgive all college zones, everyone has a right to go to college. We should be talking about community colleges, technical schools, apprenticeships, and stop. I realize where I am right now. Throwing money is at colleges like this. No, I mean, colleges definitely, I was on the board of George Mason University, Virginia's largest university, and it's a different world. I mean, you know, I could spend a lot of time talking about education, but I did have an epiphany. After I wrote this book, I think it was several months ago, I was in the White House and I was meeting with Ivanka Trump, and she said, your industry is really causing a lot of concern among Americans. They're very concerned about the future. And that's the language we have to understand and be empathetic to, is that we're talking about self-driving cars and robotics and data mining and all sorts of things. And I talk about, you know, blockchain and AI and a lot of different technologies in my book. But that's freaking people out, especially if they feel ill-prepared for it. And we are going to displace jobs. Now, the history of jobs and technology is that every new technology has upset the status quo, it's upset people, it's been used for bad purposes, whether it's the harnessing of fire, the wheel, the printing press, the car, the plane, the computer. All these things are amazing and they've done great good in the world. We're living longer. Like, you used to die at the average age of 25 or die in childbirth. We're gonna keep living longer and longer and longer. There's no question about that. But at the same time, we are causing discomfort for people. And she turned to me, Ivanka Trump, and said, what are you going to do about this? You have an obligation to do something. And then she started giving me quotas that I had to fill. And she's basically challenged our industry to come up with jobs that we will retrain people for, reskill or hire people. And already we're up to several million commitments, actually, and literally hundreds of companies have committed, from Best Buy to Walmart. IBM is there, Sony, so many others have stepped forward and said, this is what we're going to do to train people for the future. Because she said government's not going to do it. And the way government moves and the way educational community, it's not going to happen otherwise. So I think companies and business leaders are stepping up, which is my segue to talk about the Business Roundtable and what the national organization did this week. The Business Roundtable announced that they are redefining what the purpose of a business leader in a company is, at least for their entities signing on to this, the Fortune 500 companies. And this was pushed, in my view, for many years by some people. You know, you could certainly say the Elizabeth Warrens of the world and others have caused concern. But Alan Murray, who is an editor, a friend of mine, the editor-in-chief of Fortune, and he has a daily thing which you should get in many different areas for CEOs. It's really interesting. He actually has been pushing this concept for a while. He's been holding conferences on it. And they basically adopted it. What it says is you have an obligation to your stakeholders, not only to your shareholders, but you have an obligation to your employees, you have an obligation to your communities. And that's what I think we have lost in this country in the last 50 or 60 years. And what's happened is we're the World War II, the greatest generation, felt a real strong commitment throughout every element of society, including the corporate leadership, to the communities and the people that work for them. Instead, we've become a nation which has so many regulations and so many laws that people think if they are following the law, they're doing the right thing. So if you're following every tax law, if you're getting every loophole, if you're firing and hiring at will, if you're paying the least possible you can get away with, you're being a good human being, a great citizen, you're following the laws. And I think we have to get away from that and start thinking as corporate leaders are ethical. The other thing I think the reason we have to, and this is where I have a column that came out today on this, is that our political leaders have totally failed us on both sides of the spectrum. I hold them both accountable, the Republicans and the Democrats in Washington. And to me, it came to full force during the federal government shutdown. Now, I know a lot of federal government employees, and there's thousands of them that do really important things, and they're trained, and they're proud, and they've given their whole lives and their service. And basically, we were kicking them in the butt and saying, you're worthless. You're not an essential employee. We don't deserve to pay you. Go away for 2 or 3 months, and it won't matter. The country will be better. It was insulting. The first thing we did is, believe it or not, we gave money to feed them in local restaurants. We did that as an entity. And others stepped up and followed us. The second thing I did is I went out to other associations and union leaders, and I said, let's do something about this. And I got 30 union leaders and association CEOs, the largest associations in the country, including the Chamber of Commerce, to sign on to an ad that said, we agree that one thing is that we want Republicans and Democrats to open this government now and agree, because you're not doing your job. And lucky for all of us, you know, that ad was in a run in the Washington Post on Monday Friday it was resolved because some airplanes were circling New York and President Trump's friends freaked out. But the bottom line, it's still going on in a whole variety of ways. And I know that the toxic environment in Washington is, the most important thing is not what's best for the country, it's what's best so the other side cannot call a win. So we're not getting any wins. We're not resolving the immigration issues, which everyone agrees should be resolved. We're not even talking in any way about gun control. We're not talking about a range of issues where the American public actually has a pretty strong majority opinion on a lot of these issues. And it's pretty horrible. So I'm really happy to see leaders stand up. I don't agree with a lot of the leaders sometimes in what they say when they take a moral position on one side or the other, but I do like what the Business Roundtable did, saying you should speak loudly on these issues as corporate executives.
I love it too. I want to, okay, we have a few minutes. We're going to do some question and answer, so I hope you're formulating your questions.
So while you're formulating, so the CES is like the largest business event in the world. It's the largest innovation event in the world. It's not open to consumers, but by the fact that you're here, as a member of the Colorado Technology Association, you are invited and welcome to attend. You will be inspired when you go. There's over 4,000 companies that exhibit there. They're showing the latest, greatest, coolest in the future. And you'll see everything from self-driving cars and new versions of mobility, including helicopters, drones, even boats, to what's the latest in healthcare technology. But it is inspiring, and you do deals there. And we get the CEOs from around the world to come because there's so much going on there that's inspirational and gives you a positive view of the world. The most positive thing we do in Washington, frankly, is get legislators and government leaders there because they realize how important innovation and technology is to the future of humanity and our country. And it's a really, really positive thing. And it doesn't matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans. We realize once members of Congress go there, they kind of have a different view of the world. Now, sadly, a lot of them, Democrats and Republicans who are more innovation focused, like Will Hurd, an African-American Republican from Texas, they're not running for Congress anymore because they're so frustrated, because they're focused on finding solutions and being in the center and focused on innovation, but they can't play the game anymore in Washington. I didn't mean to be Debbie Downer here.
No, we're gonna follow up. I'll have one question where you have an opportunity to be
All right.
All right. But I've got to tell you, I made eye contact with my daughter. My daughter, the data scientist.
Where is she?
It's right there. Gracie.
Gracie, you got a heck of a mom. Let's hear for Gracie, data scientist.
But when you were talking about CES, I looked at her and she goes, "Let's go." All right, we'll go. I do want, and this is a good segue. That's my other daughter there, Christine.
Oh. Hi, Christine. You're welcome too.
Yeah, Christine's the director of older adult services for Easter Seals.
That's awesome. So we are, our foundation, what it focuses on is actually taking technology and using it to help people with disabilities and people who are older, because gosh knows there's a lot of opportunity there to enhance their lives. And that's the future of self-driving that I'm so excited about it as well. It's not only saving lives and injuries, it's also empowering people that are older and people with disabilities. They're our biggest allies.
So my final question, this is your opportunity for an upslope, okay?
Okay.
So if you were talking to Christine or Gracie or some of the other early career people in the room, what would you say about how do you thrive? And you know, we've got parents here, we've got leaders. How do we thrive as individuals? How do we thrive as organizations? And how do we thrive as communities?
Well, that's what the book is about. Yeah. Thank you. And you know, once you get the beginning, there's a lot about technology, some of which you may already be familiar with, and you know. So, but the last third of the book is focused on thriving and doing things in a way where you are always growing. My mother used to listen to talk radio, and I said, "Why do you waste your time on that?" And this was a long time ago. And she said, "Because if I can learn something in an hour, and you know, one thing in an hour, it's worthwhile." And I was raised to be a lifelong learner, but it's just not from schools, it's from everything. And one of the things I try to do is when I meet people on an airplane, or sometimes often an Uber or Lyft if I'm alone, or whatever, is try to learn about them. Because everybody is good at something, and they have something that you don't know that you can learn from them. So how do you thrive? You figure out what energizes you, and you go after it. And you realize, you know, one of the things that my wife contributed to this book was that we try to make lifetime decisions, and we think they're so important. But the truth is, unless you're committing a crime or getting married and having kids, which are really important lifetime decisions, The decisions sometimes are not that important because you could change them. So if you plan like, it's not a secret, it's in the book. I commute from Washington to Detroit every week. My wife agreed to marry me, we met here, but she never agreed to live with me. So she didn't agree to give up her job is what I really should have said. But so we commute and have it, but we had a couple of surprise kids that came along. And we had to move out of her little place and build a house. We needed a house, and everything every house she wanted to destroy. I said, let's go build our dream home. It's like, we can't do that. We don't know how long we'll be here. Well, let's commit to 5 years. Once we committed to 5 years, that was it. So a 5-year time span, which is pretty equivalent to like different things in college and high school and junior high, even your first job, maybe 5-year horizon, if you can make that mental commitment. So we did that, and we've been in that house now for 6 years, so it's amortized. But the point is, a lot of things are not irrevocable, and a lot of things you can change. You can change your career and do something different and enjoy life, right?
He asked me while we were having lunch, what was the big difference between moving from IBM to Colorado Technology Association? What was the big shock? And I said, it was easy. Yeah.
No, I mean, so change is good, which is what's great about the technology industry. We start with the assumption that change is good. I fought the music industry, the movie industry, the hotel industry with Airbnb, the taxi cab drivers with Lyft and Uber, and so many other industries. They're status quo industries. They're trying to protect what they've been doing forever. And that's all they're doing, and they're fighting the future. So we are in the industry of the future, and in a sense what we are fighting for is for that future. And what keeps me awake at night is the fact that I might screw up and government will do something that will choke off really major things in innovation because we haven't gotten that message out clearly enough. And that's where I feel we are now. But in terms of individual advice, I mean, there's a lot of things you would expect. You are your brand, you have to carry that through. And one of the things that we're really focused on now is diversity and inclusion as an organization for a lot of different reasons. And this is where the tech industry justifiably takes some hits on it. And I was talking earlier with a couple of my new friends about that. And I know there's a session that you guys had about a month or two ago, and which was really good, I heard. But most of our organization, I have 200 employees, and about 2/3 of them are women. And it's not like I'm trying to do anything good, to be honest with you. Women are better. They multitask, they follow up on what they're going to do, they can work in team environments without trying to have their ego get in the way. And frankly, they're really good at, where I have competitors in a room, they're really good at diffusing a situation, often with aggressive males. So I love mentoring and hiring and promoting women. So women should be the easy one first. Now, yes, statistically, there's a lack of women in technical things, and there's a lack of women in the CEO suite for a lot of reasons. And believe it, I hear it through my wife and through other women that I know and I mentor. It's difficult. It's so much more difficult being a woman, which makes you better anyhow. But I think we benefit from society, and we have goals as part of our incentive compensation goals to increase what we're doing. And what we've done is we've also created a $10 million fund that invests in women and minority-headed or owned startups, and we do it through funds because we're not going to choose winners and losers, but we'll choose funds that are doing that. We also invest heavily in youth because we want to get people to everyone should have the same opportunities. So we have a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. We have this initiative with veterans. So because I think veterans are like the best, the military is the best jobs training program there is in this country because they teach discipline, problem solving, respect, teamwork, getting along cooperatively. They're the kind of people in the business where we sell stuff and install in people's homes. They should go into people's homes because they know how to be respectful and deal with it. And we're also, focusing on apprenticeships and some of these other things. So we want to get everyone a chance, which is what the American dream is. It's that everyone has the opportunity to go as far as they can and they want.
Okay, awesome. We're going to open up to questions now. And so, Wendy, there is a mic over at that podium over there, and I'll pass my mic for now. So does anybody have any questions for Gary? You're a quiet group. Oh, there you go. And if you can say,
I'm sorry if I'm not being forceful enough in sharing my opinions.
Did you say your name and who you're with?
John from the channel. So you just spoke about technology and healthcare. What do you think, if there was single-payer healthcare, will technology help that?
So the question for the video recording is, would a single-payer healthcare system help on some of the issues that you talked about?
So I really didn't talk a lot about healthcare, but I will for a second. The challenge of the healthcare system is that the Democrats and Republicans, and even watching the Democratic debates, are focusing on important issues like why do we pay the most for drugs in the US when every other country pays a fraction of the cost? Why do we have this huge insurance complex which is sucking a lot of the money? And those are really big questions. But the truth is there's a lot of other incentives in the system which encourage the highest cost treatment possible. And I know way too much about it. My concern about a single payer system is it doesn't encourage innovation. So my wife's been involved in creating some novel treatments which don't cost a lot but are equally effective. She has one thing with the standard of care today is you go in every 4 months and pay a couple $1,000s and you get an injection and your vision is saved. Her treatment is every 8 months and it costs $29 over 2 years. And it's totally equally effective. When she's presented on it around the world and in the United States, there's 3 reactions. In the United States, doctors say, sounds like a good idea, but I'd lose so much money because I wouldn't be getting paid as much because I get a percentage of every injection. So they're not going to do a $29 injection when they could do a $2,000 injection and get the same result and do it twice as often, even though a caregiver has to bring the patient back and forth. The second response is the socialist countries like England and Sweden and others, really interesting, but we'll never do it because we never do anything new because you can't get it approved. The third reaction, the great majority of developing countries, is please teach us how to do this, give it to us, come speak in our country, show us the videos, because people are going blind in our country because they can't afford the expensive treatments. So what do I think of one? You know, we do have a single payer system for Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid is totally subsidized by Medicare, which is totally subsidized by private insurance. So it would further bankrupt the country. It would solve some problems, but I think we have to be more creative and clever and focus on keeping incentives in the system so everyone is aligned, whether it's hospitals, doctors, even drug companies, to try to provide value-based care. And you're going to hear a lot more from me in the future about value-based healthcare, because that is, so you, in the introduction, you said something which is really important and will affect all of you, is that our board decided over a dozen years ago that the biggest threat to the innovation industry in this country is the health of the US economy. The health of the US economy, the biggest threat is the growing debt. At that point, it was $9 trillion. Now it's $22 trillion. 5% normalized interest on that is well over $1 trillion a year, which sucks up every discretionary program there is in the United States. You have to pay your interest payments. If you take, you know, Medicare and Medicaid and everything else and pensions and all sorts, you have to pay all that stuff. So what is left? Not a lot. No EPA, no education, no anything. It'll all go away. Even our leaders in the defense world under President Obama stood up and said the deficit is the biggest challenge we face. So that's why we don't ask the government for money at all for our industry. We ask for it sometimes for education, for other worthy causes. But if we could slice out some of the healthcare costs, because all they're talking about is raising healthcare costs. Both parties at this point. No one's talking about lower cost treatments that are equally worthwhile or lower cost drugs or things like that. So we have to focus on that.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Thank you for asking about healthcare, because it is, we all want to be healthy.
All right. Oh, there we go.
Rajshri Patel from Make America. Gary, what do you see as possible outcomes of the conflict with China? You know, what are some solutions that you might see down the road here?
You know, I struggled with that question since Trump was running for office, and I was trying to convince some of our Trump supporters on our board that he really wouldn't be good for our industry. And they kept saying, oh, he's just bluffing, and China is doing bad things. The challenge we have is, and President Xi has fundamentally changed and brought back the concept of a ruler for life. And he's tamped down on press, and he's getting rid of his allies. It looks like he's exterminating the Uyghur people and mass education. He is a very strong-willed person, and he's doing some things which are really, really bad that we don't want to see replicated elsewhere. I mean, one of the issues that I don't know how Hong Kong will be resolved either. There's no good solution here. In a trade deal, I think China probably is hurting more than we are now. I think President Trump is right about that. They're losing a lot of jobs. There's a lot of suffering. I don't believe their numbers. So the question is, who's going to blink? Or can they come up with a deal where there's two winners? And the challenge for Trump is if he comes up with a deal, no matter what he does, even if he gets everything from China, let's be honest, the Democrats are going to say it was a horrible deal, because that's what they have to say, and that's how it works. And if he gets no deal, others will say that as well. So the question is, what's China willing to do? It did come down to two things I've heard, which both sound resolvable to me. One is, they're not putting the deal in statute form, they're just promising it. And the other is, Trump said, I'm not going to take the tariffs off until I see you performing. And the Chinese walked away from the table then. So, and there are other aspects, but it seems to be escalating. I don't see a positive thing unless one of the leaders goes, or there's some other third-party intervening event. But I do think as the economy softens, there's only three other things. And I wrote an article about this, it was on Fox.com 3 weeks ago. There's only three things Trump could do, and I said it right before the interest rates went down. You could lower interest rates, you could resolve the trade situation, and you could do this thing where he wants to index capital gains, which he has most likely the power to do without the Congress, is basically say there's no capital gains on a building, on a stock, on artwork, unless it exceeds the inflation rate from acquisition. That would supercharge the economy for a few months before the election. And everyone would sell anything they had gains, because they'd be so afraid the Democrats would come in and reverse it. The only reason they're not doing it, and I've spoken to people at the White House about this, they're really in favor of it, is that they're concerned about, and rightfully, that they're going to get slammed, that this is just for rich people. So how do I think this will be resolved? I don't know. There was a brief period, well, I won't even go into it, but I had to put myself in the mindset of being United States Trade Representative, and I think he just has to have a bilateral agreement with face saving, and he has to go back to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The other thing I propose that he do is forget all this stuff, and just say, we're going to just do to China what China does to us. So you have to have a partner, China. You have a subsidiary in the US, you want to do business here, you have to have a partner. You have to share your intellectual property that you're selling here with a US company. That would have a dramatic impact on the Chinese ability to do business. That is not, I've been told by some of my member companies, a really good idea, but it's one I proposed publicly early on.
Awesome. We have time for one more question. Alex.
So I actually wanted to talk about social media, because I think you can't talk about technology without that. But we are seeing more and more studies about how it's playing into poor mental health, particularly for our youth. Any thoughts on solutions for that?
That's a great question. And as a parent, it's one, we have a rule, no TV in our house, TV, and I represent all the TV makers. Unless it's in Chinese, actually, my kids are fluent in Mandarin. We have Chinese au pairs that have lived with us since kids are born. So, and we also have severe restrictions on their use of technology, even though my son is 11 years old and he pressures us for his cell phone that he wants to work with his friend. We don't let him have it, except we do let it for Wi-Fi with a lot of controls on it. But I see some of his classmates, I see what's going on in schools, I've spoken to their principal about it. This is a huge problem, because what it's doing is it's magnifying all the things we dealt with as kids in an accelerated pace. So bullying is like real, it's sudden, and it's brutal. And it's in every school. That and the stupid tobacco vaping, yeah. Those are the two biggest problems. There's also a lot of evidence that kids today are suffering from depression more, suicide, attempted suicide. It's out of control. And, you know, we call it the dining dead. I go out and I see families and everyone's on their devices. I have a rule in my house that it's not sometimes followed, where nothing at the dinner table. I mean, the dinner table should be a sacred place. People have to have social relationships with each other. Look, I represent the tech industry, but yet I produce the largest face-to-face business event in the world. I believe, and I'm the cheerleader for the tech industry, that you could do a lot with technology that's phenomenal and great, but it's not a substitute for human contact. It's not a substitute for meeting someone firsthand and using your 5 senses and evaluating a person or a company or a place and being there. And as much as I go see these really cool things, and I've been to a lot of demos around the country and the world with all sorts of VR and AR and mixed and being there and telecom, it's not going to be that way for a long time. You need to be with people. And we're losing social skills. And one of the things, you know, as someone who hires people, and as I'm sure you do, you need those skills. You need, like we teach our kid to look in the eye. We talk about being out there or being outside every day. And we can't give up our role as parents. And that's what's going on here, and that's the concern. One of the things I did is I pushed very hard to make sure there's a warning on every TV set that says you should not be using this, because I think there's a potential impact there with a kid that's under 2 years old, as is the American Academy of Pediatrics, sitting in front of this electronic babysitter. I don't think it's a good thing. So we limit screen time. We do everything as parents, so we walk the walk and talk the talk. And I don't think there's a company out there that makes products that really wants to see their products abused or hurting people. The challenge with social media is parents aren't doing their job, schools are struggling, and you know, I think we need some societal norms that evolve that say this is the right way to do things, and the medical groups are stepping up slowly, but it's not as good as it should be, frankly. On that happy note, I want to leave you with one thing.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
artificial intelligence is the future, and this will blow your minds. But so the truth is that it's really important, and it's very good, and it's very valuable. Because if nothing else, it'll save humanity. And here's why. 95% of the species on Earth have become extinct. And they become extinct most of the time, no reason to do with humans. I mean, there's volcanoes, there's the Ice Age, now we're talking about global warming, we're talking about nuclear, we're talking about disease. All these bad things could happen. The odds are pretty high we're going to become extinct. But with artificial intelligence, we're still at the first stage where we don't have human intelligence yet. We will get to the human intelligence stage, whether it's 5 years or 30 years, we're going to get there. And once you get there and surpass it, you can download a human's brain. Once you download a human's brain, you can put in artificial intelligence. And robotics are going at a very quick rate. You'll be able to replicate the human body and make it virtually indestructible. You put those two together and you'll be able to live forever, essentially. So we'll be able to save humanity, if you will, in a certain fashion. Either that, and the other third option is colonization of space, which we're working on, and there's a lot of good ideas going to Mars. I talked to a lot of NASA people, and that's the other, you know, the next frontier. So it's whatever you think about those crazy ideas. I mean, the truth is we're in a pretty precarious situation. We're a young species, but yet our own survival is being threatened by ourselves. But all this beautiful artwork and all the music and all the things we've created, it would be a shame if it was lost for history. So think about that. And I hope I've enlightened you and shared with you, and you enjoy the book, and you write a review on Amazon, and thank you again for coming and sponsoring and buying.